Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today I'm going to share a couple cards that I made, and they are motion cards. So I colored a bunch of these poppies and leaves with my Cezanne colored pencils, and you can see the demo for coloring them in the Cezanne colored pencil review. And I thought it'd be fun to take these flowers and make an interactive card. And you can see there how the flowers kind of bloom out of the vase when you pull on the tab. I know it's not as exciting as I planned it in my head, but I still think it's kind of a clever idea, and I'll offer some tips along the way so you might get a little bit more impact from your card when you make it. I mailed that to my mom for Mother's Day. I just thought it'd be kind of fun to have like a pull tab on a card. So I went ahead, I colored all of those images. Like I said, you can find the coloring demo in my Cezanne pencil review, and cut them out, and also cut the same shapes out of some white cardstock just to give them a little more substance. I didn't want them to tear or become brittle, so I want to make sure that these movable parts were going to be strong. So now what I'm doing is I'm arranging these different elements on my card. Now you can use whatever flower stamps that you have. I would actually urge you to use one that doesn't have so many ruffles and ridges on the edges. If you had like lollipop style flowers or something with smooth edges, this would be a lot easier to do. I find things were getting caught up on the leaves and whatnot when I was working. So what you're going to need to do is make some slots in your backing paper. So my card's going to be 5 by 7. This panel is like 4.5 by 6.5, so you get a like 1/4 inch border all the way around. And what I did here was I just made 2 little slots next to each other, or slices with a craft knife, and then I'm snipping the ends, you know, so you get like a bigger slot to pull the strips through. So this will give me 4 little like elements that will kind of bloom as the tab is pulled. I think honestly I only ended up using 3 because there was just too close together with those big flowers. The smaller your elements, the more little tabs you can have. I would really recommend trying to find something with smoother edges. And then I made a slot at the top for the pull part. So this is the part that the recipient will actually tug on to make the flowers bloom. And then you want to figure out how much you need of those strips to be sticking out of the card, and then on the back you just want to make a mark so you can cut them all the same length. And then you are simply going to put a little brad in there so that they'll all stay together. I'm using my crocodile for this so I can punch through all the layers at once, and they're going to pivot on that brad. So when the pull, like a strip is pulled, these little papers will feed through the slots that you cut, and they'll all just kind of easily move on that little brad where they're all hinged together in the center. Now if you had a really long skinny card, you could have like you'd have the main pull mast, and you could have several brads going up with the different strips attached. So you could get really creative and clever with this idea. Just kind of think about how you want the strips to move. So I just kind of played with it a little bit to see, and I realized that the pull tab was a little flimsy. So to strengthen that, I just glued another piece of cardstock to the pull tab. So when I pulled it, it would move a little bit better and it wouldn't bend. Now it is going to be attached onto the card base, so that will give it a little structure. And to help everything move, what I did was I took a piece of wax, and I couldn't find just plain wax, so I used a wax melter, so it'll smell a little nice too, and make sure that the person you're sending to isn't like allergic to scents. And I just rubbed everything with that chunk of wax so that things would move a lot easier in the card, because you want to reduce friction as much as possible anytime you have a slider card. And I just wanted to give it the best chance, give it its best chance for success. And sometimes it's fun to like kind of figure these things out, you know, get an idea and figure it out, and not rely on a template or a die to do it. So I'm using some thin foam tape to put all this together. Just make sure when you put your foam tape in there that you're not putting it anywhere it's going to catch on those sliders. You've got to make sure you have clearance for all those sliders to move. And then I am attaching that to the card base. So before you put all your decorations on, you want to get the mechanism moving, working, and lined up on the card base. Then after that, you will be able to add your blooming elements to the card. Now I'm using some double-sided tape. You could use zip dry glue, that would work as well. You just want to make sure that nothing is going to seep out. You don't want to be having glue that runs out and glues it to like the back, or glues it stuck in place. Now I did kind of a test run because I cut these flowers out with just white cardstock. I kind of put it together with these kind of temporary pieces first. They're not temporary, they're there to add structure, but I figured if I made a mistake and ripped something or it didn't work and I needed to rearrange something, if I had to tear that off and I ruined that die cut, it wouldn't be a big deal. I could always cut another one, but the poppies took a little time to color, so I really didn't want to mess those up. So once I got the flowers positioned where I wanted them, I figured out where I wanted the vase to go. So the vase, the lip of the vase is going to end up being right at the bottom of your lower slot in the center. And I just wanted to give this a little place to rest, so I'm just making a little table here with a scrap of cardstock and a doily. I've been really into using doilies on cards this week. I think it's because with Mother's Day coming around, I just think it's a nice touch. Doilies always remind me of my grandmother, and I just think it's such a fun, ladylike type of embellishment. So it's just so perfect for Mother's Day cards, or any sort of like female card. I think sister, friend, that sort of thing. Now I am using a little bit of wet glue and some double-sided tape there. That's a single serve zip dry glue that I had. I had a larger tube of that, but I have no idea what happened to it. It probably got clogged up. I have a hard time with glues, guys. I don't know what it is. I tend to, I don't know, I think I leave the caps off or something. I don't know. So now I'm using the zip dry glue to glue the decoupage elements down. So some of these are not going to move. Like this one here, I don't want that to move, so I am putting a pretty generous amount of the zip dry glue, or I would say a good coverage of the zip dry glue, and just gluing that down over the vase to give it some life. Now I realized those strips kind of stood out and I didn't like that, so I'm just sneaking in there with a marker and I'm coloring those white pull strips green. And you can use a couple shades of green to get just what you want, but the idea is to make it camouflage. Or you could also use like whatever you're going to use for your backing color of your cardstock, like that dark teal. I could have cut the strips out of that color, and that actually would have been a great idea because I did have a little bit left over after cutting that panel. That would have been a really good idea because then you wouldn't even see the strips. But just use a color similar to what your foliage is or the background, and it will work out pretty well. And now we're just gluing the flowers on top of our cardstock flowers. Now I had a physical die for this. This is a set from Stampendous. I'm not sure if it's still available, but really you could use any flower set you want. But say you're doing this from like a scan and cut. You've stamped it and you've cut it with your scan and cut. Just save your file after you've done your scanning and cutting and cut it again with white cardstock. So that's a great way to get that same exact die cut twice if you want to for your project. You could use a thicker cardstock. The cardstock I like to color on is a little bit thinner, so that's why I ended up using that. Not a big deal. Actually, I think I might have used a drawing paper because I had a little bit of tooth on that. So it was just a little thinner than what I wanted for the cards. So by cutting it with cardstock, it just gave me a little extra oomph. Now to make the pull tab, I just took a punched out circle that I had left over from my serendipity papers and folded it in half and wrote the word pull on it. And I was pretty sure I had a stamp that said pull on it, but I could not find it. And in my 30 seconds of looking, I couldn't find it. And I'm like, you know what? I can just write it. You got to pick your battles. Sometimes the first thing you come across that works is fine. Sometimes the first thing is good enough. I know we can spend hours looking for that perfect piece of paper or that perfect stamp. Sometimes you just got to grab what's good enough. Now things are catching here, and I'm annoyed because I didn't notice the petal was sticking off the edge of that card when I was putting this together. So I ended up cutting off that offending petal, which was kind of a bummer because, when you spend time coloring stuff, I hate to see any of it go to waste. I probably ended up even gluing it onto another flower because I was so stubborn about that. But yeah, you want to make sure that your card's going to fit in an envelope when you're done. I think I actually ended up making an envelope out of a thicker cardstock just to make sure it would get through the mail all right. And I did make it a little bit bigger because those darn flowers, they stuck out beyond. So that was a little frustrating, but it did work out and it was cute in the end. And I had some leftovers. I had a leftover vase and I had a leftover flower and some leftover leaves. So I thought that I would just make another card to go with it because I really, really loved how the coloring on those flowers came out. And I thought it would make a really nice card. It's nice if you're not sure, like when you're stamping and coloring something, how many elements you're going to need for a card, do a couple extra because it doesn't take a ton of extra time to make an extra card because once you've done the work the first time, everything else goes together. And this isn't a mechanical one, so it did go together really pretty, and I think I actually like that one a little bit better. And then I made a little, on the second card, I put a panel in with a washi tape so I could write on that, and that could be reused by the recipient, which I think is a nice touch because it's nice if a card can get used a couple times instead of tossed in the trash after it's enjoyed. So there you have it. You can see both cards. Here is the exciting blooming action. I know all that work for that, but I think it was kind of pretty. My mom liked it anyway. And it was fun to kind of, stretch the old brain muscles and figure out how to do it. Thanks so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up before you go. Until next time, happy crafting.